Well, hey, everybody, welcome to the Seeing Ability podcast, where we're having a conversation about the world of people with disabilities. So, we're going to be talking with sometimes adults who grew up as that person with the disability, with parents who are raising kids with disabilities, and with a lot of people supporting that community, whether it's folks in healthcare, education, or amazing nonprofits doing work to support the community. And today is one of my nonprofit spotlight episodes. So, I'm super excited. I think you're going to enjoy meeting the group that we have here from what we like to call DSL, Down Syndrome of Louisville, here in my hometown. Some of you around the country might think Louisville, but we like to say Louisville here. And I've got three amazing people with three different perspectives that you're going to meet in a minute. But as you know, if you're a listener, we always start off usually with the fast four, but these folks have so much to say today. We're going to do the quick three. So the quick three is brought to us by the folks at Reliable Tech Help. Remember, if you've got tech needs, reach out to Reliable Tech Help. They're 502-797-7399, and that's tech with a K for Reliable Tech Help. So, number one, Julie, what is your favorite sweet treat?
Chewy Sprees.
Okay. Tanya, what's your favorite music?
I have lots of favorites. So because I just listened to this person in my car, it is Alan Stone.
Okay, fantastic. And then Danny, welcome. What is your favorite streaming show right now?
Right now, it's not current, but The Mandalorian, some Star Wars stuff.
Fantastic. And then welcome to the show or to the podcast, all three of you. Let's just do a quick introduction so folks know who they're talking to. I just spouted off your names real quick, but Julie, you are the executive director of the organization, and you've been with them about how long?
Almost 5 years.
Fantastic. Yeah. So that means you got there before the pandemic, correct?
Just before, yes. About
Fantastic.
A year before.
And then Danny, you're a little bit longer tenure. Tell us your relationship to the organization.
Sure. I'm actually on the board. I'm the vice president right now, and starting in January, I'll be the board chair. Right in time for some extra fun activities in the next year. And I have a daughter with Down syndrome and have been involved with the organization since 2015.
Okay, so you're moving on up. What did they say? No good deed goes unpunished. You're going to go exactly. Right to the top. I like that. All right, and then Tanya, the tenured person in this world of kids with Down syndrome, tell us about your connection to DSL.
So I have an 18-year-old who happens to have Down syndrome. So I've been kind of like all around. I've been volunteered, I've been on the board, you name it, I've been there. So it's probably like 14, 15 years. It's probably going to change. Like every time you ask that question, it's going to be different. But he's 18, so somewhere in there.
Well, I love the diversity of all your experience, and that'll enrich our program today for our listeners. There's so many topics to talk about. We prepped a little bit for this, and we've kind of chosen three. We might only get through one, but we're going to have some fun regardless. The first one is kind of the first topic for most people traveling this journey, which is the idea that for most people, unless you're an adoptive parent, it's a path unplanned, a group of people that you didn't plan to join the world of acceptance, kind of life throwing you this curveball that you're going to have a kid who's going to face different challenges. And we've got two parents on the program, but then a professional that's talking to these families that are entering this world. So I guess maybe let's start with you, Tanya, back in the day. What was acceptance like for you? And then what did you kind of learn from it? And I'm sure you get other parents that reach out to you. What's your takeaway or what's your biggest advice in that realm?
So for me, I guess our situation was a little weird because a lot of people didn't know Elijah had Down syndrome. They always told me he didn't really look like it, which I don't know what that means. I'm like, I don't know what that means. So a lot of people did not realize at first that he had Down syndrome. I guess as he got a little older, people started to notice the eyes and features and stuff like that. So as far as outside, wasn't always a big deal. Those who did recognize that he was a little different didn't always like the fact that I that I disciplined him. Because a lot of people, unfortunately, with child with special needs don't discipline their children, but I'm not that person. So I'm fully that person that if you're doing wrong, you're gonna find out you're doing wrong, and we're gonna figure out why you're doing wrong and then correct that. So that was a challenge, but I guess the biggest acceptance thing was a lot of people would ask us, just thinking about it, like especially at church, a lot of people would ask us, "Oh, do you need us to babysit and stuff like that?" One, it's probably me. I wasn't always the person to be like, "Sure, come take my child." But but if I didn't want to have to explain, if you babysit him, this is what you're gonna have to do. If you take him here, this is what you're gonna have to do. Like, they don't understand that my child will freak out if he sees a mannequin. Whereas your child probably goes right past it, my child will freak out. Or if you go in Texas Roadhouse and see one of the deer on the wall, you don't understand my child's not going to walk in that door. Like, I have to take him kicking and screaming in.
Yeah.
But if somebody in our own world that has a child with Down syndrome or with a disability that would, cause them to freak out about something, they understand. So I can tell them that, and they're like, "Oh yeah, my child does that too." It's like kind of embarrassing sometimes. So that navigating that, the difference in between, like, my child's not going to exactly act like your child, has always been hard. So, having to not let people babysit, I think,
Yeah.
was the first thing. So,
Okay. Yeah, that's that. Thank you for sharing that. So, Danny, for you, when you guys learned that your daughter was going to have a different path, what was that like for you, for your wife, and kind of what did you learn from it?
Well, I should share that we didn't know before she was born at all. So she was born on the way to the hospital in Southern Indiana. We did not make it to the ER. And honestly, I noticed, I remember I laid her down on the front floorboard and noticed her eyes were a little bit different, but it was still crazy. And I was just focused on getting to the ER. And over the course of the day, the medical professionals, I think there was a little bit of, they thought we should have tested, but we had talked about this with people, and my wife and I both decided we weren't going to do the extra tests. And it was sort of like, just give us the information we need. Quit trying to kind of accuse us of like, well, we didn't do enough testing beforehand, and why is this a surprise? But by the time we got home the next day, or it was like 2 or 3 days later, the former executive director, this was before Julie came on, she came to our house, and it was the second time, I should say, that somebody made us feel like it was going to be okay. And it was not, just a journey that we had no idea, and it was going to be a total change in our lives. It was a total change in our lives, but it was also still going to be us as the parents of a kid with Down syndrome. We didn't become different people.
Right.
But it was a challenge, because my wife's uncle came, and he was actually involved, Steve Swan, in the original kind of development of Down syndrome of Louisville. But he told me something that still sticks with me, that I will share always with families when I meet him. He said, everything will come. It will come slowly, but it will come fully. And without defining what all that means, it was like, I just was able to relax and sort of like, okay, I can do this. Everything will come. It will come slowly, but it will come fully. It was just a different message than a lot of the people around me. We had not developed our kind of network of interior people that we could be really honest with. And so a lot of my peers were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Danny," or, "Gosh, what are you guys going to do?" It's like, we're going to be parents. We're going to learn. Right. We're going to get some new books that we didn't anticipate getting and talk to new people, but life goes on,
Yeah. So maybe a takeaway is finding a way to have the right conversations with the right kind of people that are going to make you realize it's going to be okay.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It
Yeah,
just,
and it
you
might
just,
be different, but what parenting journey is the same? I think the idea that the parent journey is going to be easy is an illusion that any parent knows. I mean, I always say there's nothing more humbling than being a parent, right? So, and there's nothing that'll upset your plans for the future more than being a parent, right? But
Mhm.
early on, having some conversation that's going to get you to a place of it's going to be okay and everything will come. It may just come at a different pace. Wow, that's powerful. Thank you. So, Julie, you've been now that person who was having those conversations that I guess was it Diana that had the conversation
Yeah.
with you?
Mhm.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
so you're doing those conversations, and that's probably been really eye-opening for you to like be having that conversation and seeing how people receive it. So, what have you observed? And then, what would your advice be for parents, whether it's Down syndrome or any kind of disability? It's probably different, but yet very similar in terms of just life throwing that curveball.
Yeah, many of the same things that you've said. Always try the line that I always try to remember to say is that um, let your child lead. Let the child lead. They give you this book of babies with Down syndrome, and it's got this. I was like, it's more like an encyclopedia. I'm like, don't look at it unless you need to reference the index for something they tell you. Otherwise, you aren't going to need the whole book. You might need 20% of the book. You might need 80% of the book, but just like our typical children, we don't know that from day one. So let the child lead, figure it out day by day as they show you what they need. Um, don't borrow trouble. Don't go read all the things, which we all went to go Google everything yesterday. And so it's such a hard thing in our world today not to do, but it's something I really try to encourage them that, we don't know what path our child are going to have. One of the very first visits, though, that I did on my own, a lot of times I try to take a mom with me or take someone with me since I'm not a mother myself or a parent myself. But the dad immediately just looked at me and said, "Will he drive?" And I was kind of just taken aback, but it made me realize how differently every person grieves and every expectation that they're looking for. And, I was like, I don't have the answer to that question. I said, but I was like, some of our members have, and then they very well may. I said, it's just, you're going to have to take it day by day and see where life leads you. And, but that really struck me to be really intuitive and aware of where they are when you walk in the room, because, they're at all different stages of processing the information. So,
Yeah, that's a really good point that it's so different. There might be one person that will they drive, another person will they get married, another person who maybe relates to the world through athletics thinks, gosh, is my kid ever going to be an athlete? I think we have one of those on the podcast, right, Tanya?
That's me.
Yeah.
yeah. And I really like that you said, though, how their acceptance is ongoing, because I do say that too. I said there is a grieving process, and it will come in waves and it will come again. I think it's okay to accept it and to move through it. Just because a lot of our members are dealing with medical things that may have happened, around birth. They're just finding out about a heart condition. And so Down syndrome's honestly way down their list at this point to be concerned about, right? That's
Right.
not the thing that they're focused on at the moment. And so that's something too to remember that they're going to be processing that again later,
Yeah.
once they get
Yeah.
out of the NICU, once they get
As the
home.
normal parenting journey has your child have all those transitions in life, to school age, all that kind of stuff. Acceptance and kind of that grieving process or that adjustment process is definitely not a one-time event. So great conversations. It's funny, this is a good segue to our next topic. Danny, you were talking about the response between people in this world and how comforting it was, and other people being like, ooh, what are you going to do? Kind of inside the sort of the Down syndrome world, and maybe just the regular community that's less familiar with that. Talk to us a little bit about, like, as you're building that village and having this network, navigating the different conversations with people who kind of like quote get it and are nodding their head, and they've been there and they're in this world and they have kids on this path, and people who don't, and the opportunities that presented for you or the challenges. I guess maybe starting with you, Danny.
Sure. Yeah, the conversations that you have inside and outside that circle are often very different, especially if you're talking about your child. It sort of points back to like when you're first you're telling people that you have a child with Down syndrome. Some people might tell you, "I'm sorry," and things like that. Then that sort of immediately puts them on the outside, and they got to work to get back onto the inside. But then you meet. I mean, I meet somebody like Tanya, or I meet there's my daughter's name is Lila. There's another family with a daughter named Lila. We have to give them second names so that they can differentiate between each other. But when we met them and our kids are almost the same age, it's like, oh gosh, can we come over and have dinner and just tell you all the things that are going on in our house that we can't tell you, but that we don't tell everybody? Because the thing is we want the world to accept our kids as they are, but also keep very high expectations and have them in school, grade reading if you can, or doing everything on their own as best they can. And we want our language to reflect that when we talk to the people outside of our, where we can be totally honest. But then when we're inside the circle of of people with Down syndrome or other disabilities, you want to acknowledge how hard it can be sometimes, and you want to acknowledge, you want to be able to mention a setback that you maybe don't want to mention in front of the grandparents who aren't real involved, maybe not grandparents, but the aunts and uncles who are sort of distant in the family, maybe, who are not don't know what it's like, and you don't want them to think, oh, it's all hard because that's what I told you about at Thanksgiving, So you you pick and choose what you share. It's like, yeah, Lila's doing great. She's like this past weekend, we went to a couple different parties and she played soccer for 15 minutes straight with a bunch of boys who were, 8 or 9 years older than her. And it was amazing. But then at the same time, she had a real crazy meltdown in public the next day. And, those two stories will go to two different places when, this week, and so one is important for me to tell the people who need to hear the good stories. And the other one, it's like, I need to commiserate, tell you how rough it was at Target, the other that kind of thing.
Yeah, so it sounds like you can't overstate the importance of having that inside community where you can sort of be real and be able to share both the good and the bad and the frustrations and the setbacks. So Tanya, for you, how is that not negotiating those two conversations?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to like what I was saying earlier, why babysitting is going to be different, a little different at times. You just have to keep that in mind. But in thinking about that, like past weekend, we had flag football, and of course, here I go referring back to sports. I just can't get away from it. But Elijah's team ended up winning the gold medal. And while we were sitting there, with other parents watching them play, we were talking about like, okay, Elijah's 18, but he moves like a 90-year-old man. And it's like, come on, Elijah, come on. And then as I'm telling them that, they're like, oh, my child does that too, and blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, it's nice to talk to people and I don't have to explain every single thing that is happening. But if I tell you I had my IEP and I just feel like the worst parent in the world because I feel like my child should be here, but they're not, somebody within our world already knows that, get it. They've been through that. They've had the IEP meetings. But if I go to somewhere that, you have, I guess, the typical child and we're talking, they have no idea what an IEP is. So that's one I cannot tell you because they be like, what's that? And then I have to explain it. I don't want to do all that. Or they'll be like, oh, I'm just so high functioning and this and that. And he gets, he can do this and that. And I'm thinking he can. But not to the extent that you're probably thinking. While you're thinking he's going to be able to go out and do and explore on his own, yes, but he's going to come home to me still. And so they're not thinking that. They're like, oh, he's going to be able to do this. He's so smart and blah, blah, blah. He is. But there's things like when I go to his IEP meeting and they tell me, he only reads at this level or he only understands this much and blah, blah, blah. You get disheartened and you're like thinking, yeah, he's smart, but it's not in the way you are. It's different, but you don't want to explain that whole dynamic of why it works, but it doesn't work, But if I'm talking to Danny and I say that to Danny gets it. So.
Right. Yeah, that's really important. So another topic we were talking about before we started the podcast was the idea of being an advocate for your kid in many areas, whether it's early on interacting with the medical community, maybe it's doctors, Julie mentioned health issues in the population, whether it's school like IEPs and that kind of thing. And we have a unique guest on today's podcast because Danny, like for a living, you've got some day job skills that help you be an advocate as a lobbyist professionally. So tell me how that background maybe prepared you differently, maybe even like you said, the differences between how your wife might see things, how you see things because of your professional orientation, and what are some of those transferable skills maybe for our listeners that like can help them become better advocates.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I started lobbying technically, I think 2005. So gosh, it's like 18 years now. But I've worked for contract lobbies. We represent lots of different kinds of companies and organizations. But one thing we've done consistently is healthcare. And so I've watched the insurance code, that the state rights change over time. And I know I'll go to a committee hearing and hear testimony from a family about, how awful their appeals process was for getting denied for, speech therapy or occupational therapy or something like that, and fighting to get those services restored, but it took 8 months and their child was 4 and now they're closer to 5 years old. That like what the kinds of challenges that come with that. I heard that and then all of it became relevant for me because we had a daughter and I'm on the waiting list like a lot of other people for Medicaid, the kind of elevated waiver services you get through Medicaid, but we've been on the waiting list since my daughter was 2 weeks old. So we've kind of had to learn to navigate what you can get out of insurance. And one thing I know from experience is that you never take no for an answer when it comes to insurance, because it's not like asking your dad for money when you're a kid or something like that. It's a company. Their job is to pay for things. Their job is to say no at certain points. But if you read to the end of the letter, everything they send you, there's an appeals process. And I learned pretty quickly that, the insurer will deny certain things if somebody's not in network. And I've learned the process of appealing that kind of thing. And then the threat of like, if somebody's not doing what you want them to do insurance wise, then involving the Department of Insurance. And when you get the state regulators involved, insurers and groups like that tend to work a little bit better. But nobody tells you that. Nobody tells you about the Department of Insurance. I didn't know about it outside of lobbying. And I thought it was just sort of something that lobbyists and insurers use. But there's a whole consumer branch of people who are supposed to help with that kind of thing. And knowing about them and being able to reach out to them, they carry a lot bigger stick than an individual family does when it comes to, insurance. And if you get denied and you're like frustrated and you're like, I just want to quit and move, no, you pick up the phone and call that person's boss, or you call the Department of Insurance. Those are the kinds of things that I knew when coming into starting the IEP for my daughters in first grade, that there were going to be points where the folks on the other side of the table, and it's their job is to say, no, I don't think you guys need this. And our job, if we think we need it, is to say, I think we do. And then kind of, it's not necessarily adversarial, but it's also, everybody needs to know that we're not going to give up until we think we got what we need. And sometimes we learn, maybe in an IEP, especially, maybe you asked for too much at some point and you dial it back, but better to ask for more than you need than to leave something like that sitting on the table,
Yeah, that's really good advice. So Tanya, do you have you probably have a story or two of where you learned the value of not taking no for an answer?
I don't know if I have a really good story. I'm kind of unique because I worked for an insurance company, and so I knew that you can go for that appeal. But yeah, I mean, I'll piggyback on what Annie says. Don't take no for an answer. You keep pushing until you get the answer that you want, or at least get some of what you need, because there's going to always be somebody that says no. The insurance company usually has third-party people who are examining things, and a lot of that's their job. They're there to say no. So my biggest thing is when families ask me a question about things like that, I tell them, you just keep pushing until you get what you need. If you have to go a different route and go through Jerry instead of Helen, go through Jerry, because you never know. Jerry might have the answer, even though you thought Helen knew everything, but Jerry might just know the back door into it. And that's what has happened for me a lot, is that if so and so doesn't know, I'll go through somebody else, and that person is usually that person has like a little more insight, and they'll say, "Here, I can tell you how to get it this way," and that's how it happens. So
Yeah,
never give up. Keep pushing.
sometimes there's a big difference between Jerry and Helen, that's for sure. And
Yes.
yeah, and I think that's going to come up for folks as they navigate healthcare and, dealing with, like I said, doctors, therapists, different things. It's going to come up in the educational setting. It's definitely going to come up in the insurance setting. So really good stuff. Well, you guys are all connected by this wonderful organization, Down Syndrome of Louisville. So Julie, for folks who are listening, who are like, I kind of have a general idea what you do, but tell us a little bit more about like the programming you guys offer. What do you have coming up? And I guess I'll ask you, as the fairly new 5-year executive director, what is the most passionate thing that you love about the work you do?
Oh gosh, that's a lot. Well, one thing I was going to say, I've had the revelation about the two topics we talked about together. I got a real quick master's class, I feel like, on inclusion and education when I first started, from Dr. Jenny Cannams and all of these wonderful people who work at our organization. And then I met another mom who was a little bit further down the path, and her member was an older adult. And she said, yeah, I was kind of on this like soapbox about all that. And she was like, yeah, but this is home, but DSL is also home. And I was like, oh, like, so you kind of have, again, those moments in life where it's like they need the acceptance of having a home at DSL, but also being a huge part of their community and advocating for them in the community. And then on the flip side of that, I had a really emotional moment with a mom at our mom's night a few weeks ago, of just where you get to let those walls down, like that you guys, obviously, like you're just discussing, become these fighters, like from the gut, immediately become mama bear and daddy bear for your member. And that's amazing. But you also have to have a place where you can let those walls down and just be Tanya and be Danny, And so, I've been emotional all day today. I don't know my problem. And just it was kind of a revelation for me that it's not just the members we're home for, but maybe the parents too, that's a community for them too. So whew, that's a whole nother thing. Okay. Anyway, but as an organization, we are a pre-birth till end of life services and resources and programs for our individuals with Down syndrome, who we call members because we're like a big family. And really, we have grown with some exceptional parents who've created programming throughout their child's life. Whatever they needed, we created for them. And so we provide first steps. We have preschool, toddler, infant group classes that are free for families, school support, IEP support, summer camp, and then our adult program after college is kind of like a college type setting after high school, where they can come to our day program and have healthy movement and curriculum and just continue their lifelong education. So we are the largest Down syndrome association in the world. That's a big deal. But because of those parents, we are the largest Down syndrome association in the world and provide the most services of any other association. So
wow,
we're pretty blessed.
And if folks want to learn more about you, where would they go to do that?
They can go to dsoflou.org or just Google Down syndrome of Louisville. Or we also have a new app now that has some great quick find resources. So you can go on Android or Apple and look for Down syndrome of Louisville and download our app and find out more information there. And
then what's the thing you like most about your job?
Oh gosh, not sure I said it earlier. I babysat for one of our members in high school and just kind of fell in love with her and everything she was, and never went away. I kind of hung around the organization until I fit in somewhere. But just our members and being able to walk down the hall and hang out with them every day. Elijah gave me one of my biggest laughs the other day when he was in the building. I told Tanya about that, but just being able to experience and watch them grow, and also share them with our community. I think that's something else that one of our parents said to me recently. She said, actually, in front of a big group I took her to talk to, that our community is different than other communities, and that they're more accepting of our members. And I hope that has to do with some of the education and outreach that we do. But she felt like in her experience that they had a lot more stares and misunderstandings in other communities. And since they've been in our community, she's like, people trip over themselves to come talk to my daughter. Like they want to come talk to her, you know. And I think that's kind of how the person that I was, that I always was drawn to our members and wanted to be around them. And so I hope we can teach people that that's okay, that they can, you know, include them and be part of their lives and be part of Down Syndrome of Louisville, and that it's not a scary thing anymore.
Think of how much that would mean to those parents that started everything years ago to hear that ripple effect, that that's what our community is like. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it was pretty powerful to hear that.
So Danny, you're obviously, you could have been just a parent who's coming and doing the program services. What made you want to get involved at the board level and give back to this organization?
I think initially I really, I knew about the waiting lists in Frankfurt, and I thought about that advocacy piece of it. And that was why I joined initially, because I didn't think about Down syndrome beyond the life of my, you know, at that point, 8-month-old, 9-month-old child.
Yeah.
But since then, all the things like this, the infant classes we did, the first steps, which is, you know, where somebody comes to your house. Dawn from DSL was coming to our house to help encourage our daughter to walk and things like that. I started to learn more about the programs, and now I can't leave. You know what I mean? And now I want my daughter involved in everything. She does the Boogie Down ballet crew on Saturdays. She does the Saturday school, and it's one of those things. Is I want my daughter to thrive and be comfortable where she is, and I know she's always comfortable and safe at DSL. And so, I mean, whatever I can do to support it would just is easy as pie for me. You know.
That's awesome. So Tanya, being the tenured member with the organization, you've kind of seen it change over the years. What still keeps you passionate about the work of this particular group?
I have to say, like, people like Danny, being able to meet new people, and the different things that we offer our members and our families. When we started, it was still in a little house on one of the major streets here in Louisville, and like we didn't have much room, but we were starting to grow. People wanted their kids to be involved, and we started going to Saturday school. That's how we originally got involved, and then we eventually moved to the building that we're in now. And the fact, just to see how much it's grown and how much we're still growing, to the fact that we still need more space now, is exciting, because like you got to think, how many places can you think of that cater to specific needs and continues to grow year after year after year? You don't see that a whole lot. And the fact that our organization does, the fact that our organization is one of the top out there, the fact that everybody looks to our organization as to how to do this or how to do that. We have companies reaching out to us. We have restaurants reaching out to us. Like, people want to be involved. And like, just like right now, we have a partnership with the women's soccer team. And we've done so many things with them. And one of them has, you know, literally taken our organization under her arm and has like a big hug on it, around it. And now she, you know, she's up for an award, you know, honor, just because she is involved in our organization. And so it's things like that. And we become more and more a part of this city. We're not just another organization. We are part of the city. And that keeps me motivated.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you guys all for coming. I think we could talk for hours, but I do try to keep our episodes brief. So again, hopefully you'll find out some more about Down Syndrome of Louisville. If you enjoyed this episode and listening to these great people, we would love you to go to our Facebook page, like the page, follow the podcast, and share it with others. You know, we think we want to create a sense of community, because this is the inside, this conversation here at Seeing Ability, and we want you to share it with other parents or family members of folks traveling this journey that think could benefit. So thank you guys so much for being here. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next time.